Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Amanda and I am a neurodivergent woman. I have autism, ADHD, a very rare memory disorder called SDAM, severely deficient autobiographical memory, and multisensory or global aphantasia, which means that I don't experience any of these senses in my mind. I talk about all these subjects on my channel, so check out your playlist and make sure you hit subscribe to keep getting videos about these kind of fun topics. Brains are fascinating. Today, and I'm not a therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, doctor of any kind. This vlog is just my personal experience as a late diagnosed neurodivergent person. Matter of fact, I grew up my entire life pretty much thinking I was neurotypical and not understanding why I struggled so much. But I'm going to get into that in a minute. This video is talking about why or how I was able to make it until 42 without getting diagnosed. So the short answer is that in the 80s and 90s, psychiatrists and psychologists primarily were focused on white males presenting with autism. Women, AFAB, and other minority groups in general, male and female, are just completely were severely underdiagnosed. I'm not saying the occasional woman did not get diagnosed, but most times, especially any with the more what they call inner traits of autism versus the external traits of autism. So some external traits of autism would be a kid that is doing very big repetitive stimming, lots of rocking, extremely low eye contact, a lot of times low verbal. Ironically, a lot of autistic people have hyperlexia, which means that they learn to read or teach themselves to read at an earlier age. And a lot of these kids actually get put into a gifted program. I'm not saying all gifted people are autistic, but there is a very high overlap where giftedness actually ends up being undiagnosed autistic people. As for me, any late diagnosed autistic person is going to be able to look back at their life and see the signs were always there, because autism is from birth. It's the way a brain is developed. It's not something that you can get later in life. So I grew up kind of always feeling like there was something I was not understanding, something that was missing from my life, like some explanation. I would always feel like it was the outside person looking in. Like no matter how hard I tried to do what I thought I saw other people doing, I just never was quite successful enough. But instead of having the label of autism, which, explains all of this, I was labeled too pushy, because like when I would get a friend, I would be very interested in that friend and kind of afraid to lose them, because so many friendships have dissolved over the years. So sometimes I would become like too clingy, too pushy, too much, where words often used to describe me. I also was sometimes too shy, which would really confuse adults, because oftentimes I was also really outgoing. So how those two kind of played out is anytime there was something that was a new situation, I was extremely shy, because anything new caused me a lot of anxiety, because as an autistic person, I wanted to know everything before going into a new situation. Once I was comfortable in the situation, then some of those other traits of being, too much would come out. But the other side of it is sometimes in a new situation, I would immediately become bossy or the leader, because that was a way for me to kind of have control over a situation. Because if I became the leader, then people would have to follow my choices. And so oftentimes I would find myself as the leader. Also, I think a lot of times autistic people really do make natural leaders because we are very good at seeing everyone's point of view, taking in all that data, processing it in our mind, although sometimes slowly, and then coming up with creative solutions. So we actually make really good leaders, but it oftentimes was a coping mechanism. It wasn't because I wanted to be the leader. It was just a survival thing. There was so many times where I didn't want to be the leader. I knew it, but I was just like, if I didn't, then I was more, I won't say at the mercy, but I can't think of the right word, of whatever the leader of that group would assign. If I was the leader of like a class project or something, then I could pick what part of the project I would do. And, various other groups growing up. I was often also considered to be too conceited because a lot of autistic and other neurodivergent people, we tend to share stories by related experiences. So if someone is telling us something, we kind of think of a similar related situation that we've had in our life, and we'll share that as part of the dialogue. And when you have a conversation between two neurodivergent people, it's almost like a volleyball game. We're volleying the topic back and forth, and it's like, oh, yeah. Okay, because you said that, it made me think of that. Is this like, are we on the same page? And then the other person's like, yes. But when we do the same conversation pattern with a neurotypical person, they think that we're trying to hug the conversation, make the conversation about us. And that's not it at all. We aren't trying to hog the spotlight. We're trying to empathize and understand what the other person is saying. And that's how we do this. It was so incredibly hurtful growing up, knowing that people thought I was conceited and that thought that I was always wanting to talk about myself. Now, a lot of autistic people don't want to talk about themselves at all, and they do fade to the background. For me, again, I think because I'm PDA profile, pathological demand avoidance, it's a profile of autism. I want autonomy over my situation and my body. And a lot of times that comes out as like the bossy or, I don't know how to explain it. I have to be in control of situations. And a lot of times that is me leading the conversations because awkward silences are bad. So because of not understanding how to read social situations, I often don't know what questions are appropriate to ask different people. I don't understand hierarchy and friendship levels. So I often think that I'm much closer to a person than I really am. And I I now know that, as I've gotten older, that when you're closer to somebody, you can maybe ask what you would consider more personal questions than somebody who'd be like an acquaintance. But growing up, my way to kind of navigate this awkward social situation of never knowing what types of questions were not too personal to ask of another person, I would just talk about myself, try to get the conversation started. For me, it was like, hey, I feel comfortable sharing this information. If you also feel comfortable sharing that information, then please do. So, pausing here for a second, y'all are probably hearing my daughter coughing in the background. She is getting over a cold, and poor girl is just coughing and coughing and coughing, and there's not really much I can do. The sound travels across the whole house. So these signs of autism have been in my life always. They were always there. editing Amanda here. I don't think I kind of summarized that the way I wanted to very clearly. What I'm trying to say is that these traits were always present. They just weren't labeled as autism. They were labeled as negative things because psychologists, psychiatrists, and therapists, teachers, adults just were not educated on what autism can look like. And that's why channels like this and bringing awareness are so important. It's just professionals were not trained to look at them in women. The traits present often differently. We take things so generalized. I take things literally. I have trouble in social situations. I have a hard time maintaining friendships. I actually do have trouble with eye contact. This was one growing up. So, you would hear about some of these things about autism, and I always, if a show had an autistic coded character, they were my favorite character, always, because I was related to them. It's like I understood how they felt, but I didn't think I was autistic because the most common traits of autism, I didn't really see how they applied to me. Like, for instance, the eye contact one. Because I was high masking autistic, I thought I could make eye contact. I didn't quite understand that it wasn't just never. Like, I thought if you were autistic, then you like just never look someone in the eye. Oftentimes, because females, again, are told to smile and look me in the eye, blah, 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 we mask strongly. So I would often look at people's mouths. So at least I'm looking at their face. And part of that's also because of auditory processing disorder, to the point where I actually got my hearing tested because I thought I couldn't hear people. But it's just that it takes longer for me to process audio. So watching someone's mouth actually can help me. I would look at someone real briefly and then look down at, my knitting or my crochet because that's socially acceptable. I would kind of glance at them for a few minutes and then look away, especially when it's my turn to talk. When they're talking, sometimes I can intently look at them too long without realizing it. So I did have trouble with eye contact, but I didn't even realize it myself because I was so high masking. Because it's not, here's the other funny thing, because autistic people tend to take things literally. When I heard a diagnostic criteria is that you can't make eye contact, I thought that meant never, like never make eye contact. Well, I could make eye contact sometimes. Matter of fact, I think on my intake papers, when it said eye contact, I was like, yeah, I do that. But then the more I really thought about it, no, not really. And there's some people I can't look in the eye at all. Which I have noticed in my life. I feel like I'm going on tangents. Like I said, I am ADHD too. And so sometimes trying to get back to the main topic can be very hard. Well, yeah, also how I was late diagnosed ADHD, because that's very relevant to this, is that my sister was actually diagnosed ADD because they didn't have a separate, like right now, ADD and ADHD is all the same level diagnosis. But back then, when she was a kid, it was ADD. And her presentation was much more just like the standard typical ADD presentation, like always forgetting things and never ever could stay focused. I was just so much more high masking. Also, being the older sibling, that played a lot into it. But I was like, okay, if that's ADD, then I obviously am not. Not understanding that there's different presentations and that masking takes a lot into consideration. My autistic programming, that I like to say, is that I was programmed to be a good girl and to make others comfortable at my own expense. So that masking hid a lot of my ADHD traits and autistic traits. I would push through past comfort because that was a survival technique to make it in society. I was always really comfortable around ADHD people because I understood how the brains worked. I made a TikTok the other day where I was talking about, like, since I grew up thinking I was neurotypical, I would have problems with executive functioning, be so hard to task switch, or to, like, it's like, oh, I want to go do something. Like, you really want to do it, but your brain and your body just won't let you. Um, it's really hard to explain. But I used to think, oh my God, if it's this hard for a neurotypical person, my God, it must be difficult for ADHD people. So getting the validation for that was like huge, because it's like, oh no, I am one of those people they were talking about. This is executive functioning disorder. This is what it looks like. I'm not lazy. I'm not, like, all these negative labels that get associated with undiagnosed people. Being diagnosed was like so good, because it's the first time that I stopped thinking that something was wrong with me and that something was absolutely right with me. Now, I won't lie, you can watch my playlist. It has been a very up and down roller coaster of emotion, but it was the first time where it was like all of these things, too pushy, too conceited, too shy, too much. No, it's autistic. And so I'll wrap it up by saying, I probably wouldn't even have gotten diagnosed because I was such a high masker, although I was getting really close to just ultimate burnout. And I have been going through burnout the last couple of months. But my kids, also late diagnosed ish, because they weren't diagnosed in early childhood, they're diagnosed at 14. They were showing signs of autistic burnout, which got diagnosed as depression at first, but it just didn't seem like the right fit for me. Like, I'm like, I'm not a medical doctor, but depression just didn't seem right. And depression is a very valid diagnosis, and it is a very serious thing that a lot of people face. But when I would kind of compare the criteria, I'm like, it just didn't seem right. So I kept digging and digging and digging, and I was like, what about autism? And then I heard about autistic burnout, and it put the pieces together. And while I was doing all the research for them, I then saw all the traits that I had been hiding behind, all the traits that I'd been masking my entire life so deeply. So that's how I got diagnosed at 42. Thank you so much for watching. Until the next time. Oh, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, guys. Really appreciate your support of this channel, because there's so many of us out there, and so many family members that are now having family or friends that are getting late diagnosed, and they're like, what the heck's going on with my friend? Because it has been life-changing. So I really hope that my channel grows, get more exposure, so that more people can kind of see how this all kind of plays out, and the real life lived experience of a late diagnosed neurodivergent person. Till the next one, guys. Bye.